My stepmother bought this for me.
That great poetry.
Okay. Are you recording?
Yeah.
You know? Okay. So
Hey.
we're starting
Hey.
our poetry section, and we're on page 125 in the book. And the first thing we're looking at is how to decide what to write about. And probably the first step in deciding what to write about is analyzing poetry. It's looking at how other poets decide what to write about and how they write about it. So we're going to do that today. That's going to be your homework assignment. We're not actually going to write any poetry yet. We're going to analyze poems and write down our analysis. Then starting next week, we'll begin writing poetry. But really the first step in writing poetry is kind of understanding it. And this is something that was not explained well to me in high school. And I just thought what made a poem was like being weird and breaking rules.
No, it has to do with each syllable. It has to do with the placement of the word. Like you can have a poem where the words are placed weird to make a picture.
Yep, yes, that is true. There are many different ways to write poems, but let's start by thinking about some key elements that all poems have. Does anyone have an idea? What is a key element that every poem has in it? Yes.
Some of them have syllables.
No, you said some. All poems. All poems.
All
yes.
poems are usually thoughts that the writer hadn't put down.
Okay, yes. Thoughts the writer hadn't put down. Michael?
Words.
Bruh.
Good job.
Allison?
Titles.
Titles. All poems have titles. Another thing all poems have is figurative language.
Figurative
language.
Yeah, comparisons. And that's something we're going to look at today. And next week when you write your poem, it's going to be part of it, is you're comparing something. What makes interesting poetry is weird comparisons. Comparing something with something that you would never normally compare it to. Comparing a person to...
Or like
A
a white
fish.
birch to a tree, both
Yeah.
tall and stiff.
Right, yeah. And that's what makes it interesting. Figurative language, it's imaginative, it's unusual, it catches your attention.
Hey.
Alright, so here are some questions, and you need to write these down. You're going to use these in your homework. Questions for analyzing poetry. Alright, number one, how is the poem organized? And we can think of this in two different terms. Like Natalia was saying, sometimes poems are just visually interesting, and the words can make a spiral, or they can move up and down like a mountain. Visually, how is the poem organized?
Like where the sidewalk ends. It
Yeah.
has some poems in there that are like
Yeah.
pictures.
Yeah, sometimes, you know how we always align to the left on a paper, sometimes we align to the right.
Sometimes they have weird spacing to make them look like
So look visually, how is the poem organized? And then you can also think about it in terms of the content of the poem. Maybe the first paragraph is all about one topic, and then there's a new stanza about another topic, and then we come back and revisit the first topic in the third stanza. So look at first visually how it's organized, and then as far as the content, how is the content organized? And we'll talk about that more. We'll do an example together so that makes more sense. Then the next question is anything repeated? Why would a poet repeat something?
for emphasis.
For emphasis, because you want to make a point. And so that's something you can keep in mind next week when you're writing. If there's a point you really want to make, what's something you can do?
Repeat it.
Repeat it. Yes.
Like even in here, it says, "And the whirring sail goes round twice."
Yep. That's the poem we'll look at in a minute.
Wait.
Oh.
There are two. I don't know if this is like supposed to be, but it says twice or thrice his round delay.
Well, just hang on that poem. We'll go over it together in a minute once we have all of these questions. All right, does this poem have a rhyme scheme?
Not only did he.
Why would a poem have a rhyme scheme? Any thoughts?
To make it catchy.
Yeah,
Make
make
it
it
sound
flow
good, or
easier.
if the author just wanted it to have a rhyme scheme.
Right, yeah, it's how you want it to sound, and there are certain subjects that you might write about where it would be natural to have a rhyme scheme. If you're writing about the sound of rain, it would be natural to have a certain flow to that poem. You might want it to sound like the sound of rain. Not all poems need to rhyme or have a certain rhythm, but that's something to keep in mind when you're writing with your subject. Does it make sense for this poem to have a rhythm or a rhyme to it or not? And then also when we're analyzing poetry, we want to look at that too. How is the author adding to this poem by the way it sounds? What is the only way you can figure out an answer to this question?
Think about
Look
it
at
and read it.
Reading it out loud.
Like Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
Yeah, like Edgar Allan Poe. If you read that in your head, you can't really feel the rhythm, but like when you're reading out loud, it just kind of
You should read through poems multiple times. You should read them out loud because there are things you're going to miss if you don't read them out loud. Okay?
Okay.
Next, what figurative language or vivid imagery does this poem have? Alright, that was kind of what we were talking about before. That's one thing all poems have in common. They all use figurative language, comparisons, similes, metaphors, vivid imagery, something that stands out to you, grabs your attention. And then we can also think about those devices like alliteration, those sound devices, consonants, assonants, all the ways that an author can make a poem sound interesting to you. Look for those. Look for onomatopoeia. Those are words like a dog says bark.
boom.
Yeah, boom. Look for those interesting devices that the writer uses. And then that will also help you in your writing to figure out where the best place is to use these devices. And really, this is key. Even when we get into essay writing again in the future, or storytelling like we've just covered, figurative language and vivid imagery really should be everywhere, not just in your poems. One way to make an essay interesting and catch the attention of your reader is to use figurative language and vivid imagery, especially like your college application essays. They love that junk. So we will practice that a lot in poetry, and that will help you. You can throw in some of that in the future.
To apply for college, you need to write an essay.
There
A lot
was
of colleges.
a child named Eustace.
I don't know if you have
Books
to for
and things.
everyone.
That would be
I haven't
nice.
applied to every college, but yeah.
Why not?
All right. And then now we're getting into some subjective, some opinion questions. What do you think the poet is trying to say? Okay, so this is an opinion question. This is something you're going to run into a lot in the future, is what do you think the author is trying to say, and that's your opinion. You can't be wrong, but you need to prove it, okay? So
you can.
anytime you see this question in the future, it can be whatever you think as long as you can prove it. And that was something that was kind of a fun challenge in English in high school. A friend and I, when we were bored, we would try to come up with like ridiculous things that were obviously not true. But as long as we could prove it, the teacher didn't care. And you'll see this a lot in high school and college. What is the author trying to say? Prove it. As long as you can prove it, you're good. Okay? Next, what feeling do you get from reading this?
Sadness.
Shouldn't Nathan and Jacob be here?
Yeah, I'll go over it separately with them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay? This is kind of along the same idea as what the poet is saying. This is an opinion question. It's going to be different for each person based on your experiences and how you read into that in the poem. But again, as long as you can prove it, it doesn't matter how crazy it makes you feel. If you can prove it, oh, well, this happy poem about the Piccadilly Circus makes me feel sad because the line about the merry-go-round reminds me of the time I tripped over a merry-go-round and broke my leg.
How can you trip over?
I don't know. I'm just making stuff up.
As long as you can prove it.
Another opinion question.
I have a
No
scar right
wrong
here.
answer, as long as you can prove it. All right. And then the last question is, what in this poem do you connect to, enjoy, dislike, or notice? Okay.
I can't.
Yeah, hang on. I'll move it.
This is why I don't like to read binders.
Because we're left-handed and it hurts.
All right. This
Just
is
take
our
the piece of
final
paper out.
Opinion question. And when you're doing this with your homework assignment, do you see how it's got 4 parts? There's connect to, enjoy, dislike, or notice. In your homework, you don't have to answer all 4 parts. You don't have to find something you connect to, and find something you enjoy, and find something you dislike, and find something you notice.
That's why it says or.
One of those or 2 of those is fine. Does that make sense? Yes?
1 or 2? Which one?
You pick.
Bruh.
Let's say you're reading the poem and there's something in it I don't like that. Okay? There you go.
The poem.
She killed dead Dobby's dog.
Alright, so now we're gonna go through that first poem together, The Owl, and we're going to read it. We're going to read it out loud, and then we're going to go through our questions.
Can I read it?
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Michael.
Read the whole poem, The Owl.
When cats run home and light is come and dew is cold upon the ground and the far off stream is dumb and the whirling sail goes round and the whirling sail goes round alone and warming his paper alone and warming his 5 wits the white owl in the belfry sits.
Can I read the part? The second part?
Alright, here, go ahead.
When merry milkmaids catch the latch, and really smells the new mown hay, and the cock hath sung beneath the hatch, twice or thrice his roundelay, twice or thrice his roundelay. And alone and warming his 5 wits, the white owl in the belfry sits.
Alright, so let's read it one more time. This time Bella do the first stanza and Allie do the last.
When cats from home and light is come, and dew is cold upon the ground, and the far off stream is dumb, and the whirling sail goes round, and the whirling sail goes round. Alone and warming his 5 wits, the white owl in the belfry sits.
The merry milkweed click the latch, and rarely smells the new mown hay. And the cook hath sung beneath the thatch, twice or thrice his roundelay, twice or thrice his roundelay, alone and warming his 5 wits, the white owl in the belfry sits.
Okay, so let's go over our questions, and then at the end, the author has also analyzed this poem, and so we'll look and see if there's anything he noticed that we didn't notice, or vice versa.
Whoa.
So our first question, how is the poem organized? Visually, how's it organized?
In 2 big
Little
chunks.
columns.
Paragraph.
2 stanzas, 2 paragraphs. How about the content? How is the content organized?
Describing the things around where he sits and then talking about how he sits.
Yeah, exactly. It's describing a setting. So the poem, even though the title is The Owl, it's not really so much about the owl. It's about what's going on around him. Because the only thing we really see about the owl is that he's sitting in the belfry. So we could even think maybe this is from the point of view of the owl. This is him looking out from the bell tower. These are the things he sees. Interesting. Is anything repeated?
Yes.
Yes.
The whirring sail goes round, twice or thrice his roundelay, alone and warming his 5 wits, the white owl in the belfry sits.
Okay. So let's look at the whirring sail goes round. Why do you think that is repeated?
Because
Goes
there's
around
Make sure
twice.
that you,
multiple.
because it keeps going.
Goes around twice.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking of, that it gives you like a visual picture of something going around because it's repeated. And the rooster singing twice or thrice his roundelay, it's a visual idea of something that keeps going and going and it repeats itself. And I thought that was cool. What about the white owl in the belfry, alone and warming his 5 wits?
He has 5 wits. He's alone warming them, and he sits.
I think it's to tell you that he hasn't moved.
Yeah, he hasn't moved.
He's still
He's
just
stayed
sitting there
in the
looking
tower.
at people.
Yeah.
Good.
It's like, here's the stuff, he's sitting here. Here's the stuff, don't worry, he's still sitting here.
He's sad and alone.
Okay. Does this poem have a rhyme scheme?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does.
I think it's maybe
Calm,
any
and
other
then
word?
it's ground but dumb.
Latch
And then
down.
round, wits, sits, latch, that, roundelay,
Hey,
wits, sits.
rounded.
Yep, so it does have a little bit of a rhyme scheme.
Oh yeah, ground, and then so it goes round and round.
Oh.
Yeah, you get it. Come, dumb, ground, round.
Hey, round delay.
Roundelay.
And it's nice. I think it gives it a nice rhythm, and you kind of get the idea of the songs that are mentioned. I like it.
Wait, songs are mentioned?
The
Rooster.
rooster. Alright, what figurative language / vivid imagery does this poem have?
I think it gives a pretty good picture of like
The
farm
area,
areas.
We're describing the setting. Do you see any comparisons?
No.
Do you notice? One thing I notice is personification, and that's when we take human attributes and we ascribe them to something that is not human. So if you look at the 3rd line of the 1st stanza, it says, "And the far-off stream is dumb." So dumb now means like stupid. Dumb also meant,
slow.
no, Katie wasn't dumb like unable to speak?
Yeah, unable to
Yeah.
speak.
So either way, whatever meaning
Oh, like the
this
babbling,
has,
like the
yeah.
babbling stream. Yeah.
whether it means stupid or unable to speak, that's a human attribute that we've given to the stream. So what do you think the stream is like?
Very quiet.
It's quiet.
And then, so you notice how in the 1st stanza it's talking about stuff people do at night, and so it's like the process of him. And then in the 2nd one, it's about the morning.
Oh, very good, Natalia. Yeah. The cats run home, the light has come, the dew is cold on the ground, a far off stream is dumb. Nice. Interesting. All right, so let's look at the second stanza. Let's look for more figurative language or vivid imagery. What else do you see?
Technically roosters can't sing.
Okay, yeah.
But
Can't sing,
I guess.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like in that first line when merry milkmaids click the latch. I like it when we take a word that isn't a verb and make it a verb, and everyone knows.
When they click the latch.
You read click the latch, and click isn't a verb. It's not something you can do.
It's onomatopoeia.
But when you read that, you know exactly what that means, right? To click the latch.
Yeah, it's like it's not a word, but everybody
No,
gets
I
it.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
To
Like
click
when
the
you
latch.
slam the book.
Yeah.
Slam isn't really a verb.
Or like if I told you to go in the car and click the lock, that means to push it down. Now I guess click is a verb because we use it on the computer. But when this poem was written, we didn't click the mouse, so it was cool. So there's some more interesting imagery that we see in this poem. All right, so we're getting to opinion. What do you think the poet is saying? What do you think his purpose was in writing this poem? This is all your opinion, you just have to be able to back it up.
While everybody else is running around doing stuff, the owl is just kind of sitting there and kind of just watching them.
Okay, so you gave us the why you think that, but you didn't
No,
tell
it's
us what you
because-
think. So
No, it's like the owl is just kind of,
Chill.
yeah, he's more like a guardian rather than a person of the field. He's more like,
so what is the poet saying?
that's what the poet is saying. The owl is more like a guardian.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was thinking. So the poet is saying the owl is a guardian, and then we see that because you said he sits there like a guard.
Yeah, he's not really doing stuff that the other people are doing. He's more just kind of.
Okay, what would be really interesting is if you were able to find words in the poem that like a guard uses. Like military terms. If you were able to find that in a poem, then that would really prove your opinion, and that would be very interesting. Or that's something to keep in mind. Maybe you want to write a poem about an owl who is a guard. Throw some military terms in that poem. It'll really set the mood and give the reader that idea without coming out and saying the owl is like a military guard. Michael?
Aren't owls nocturnal?
Yes.
So that makes me think that he's more like a statue. He sits in the same spot, and then he's even there during the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another interesting. And you see how with these opinion questions, there's no right or wrong answer. What your opinion is cannot be wrong. But if you prove it, then
you're right.
Interesting. Okay, so you
Right.
both proved it. Good. All right, so let's go to our next opinion question. What feeling do you get from reading this poem? I'm gonna look
Like
for.
maybe peace or
Yeah, go ahead. Val.
calmness.
Okay, what makes you feel that peace or calmness?
The stream is quiet.
Mm-hmm.
It's quiet.
I just imagine like a quiet farm and like hearing like a little sail going around.
Yeah, and merry milkmaids. They're merry. They're happy. They're
I don't imagine much of
It
it.
feels like you're sitting on a farm and you're just kind of watching everything. Like it's a whole layout, it's a whole setup, and you're just kind of sitting there peacefully watching everything happening.
good. Okay, that was a very good way to answer that question. You guys did a good job proving your opinion. All right, last question. What do you either connect to, enjoy, dislike, or notice in the poem? And I want to answer from Allison.
I enjoy the owl.
Yeah?
That
What-
he's just sitting there and he's like watching over everything.
Good.
It gives kind of like a calm feeling to it.
Very good. Anybody else?
Enjoy.
I
the
connect to
calm.
where it says he's alone.
Alright, so let's flip over a couple pages to page 131. And let's read what our author had to say about the poem. Number 1, the owl is quite obviously at its most literal about an owl. As the morning world awakes from the slumber of night, good catch, Tal, the owl continues its motionless vigil. Motionless. Perhaps it's the solidity and quiet authority that the author tries to evoke by repeating certain lines. The repetition creates a feeling of grandeur, consistency, and solidity. Notice that the repetition functions in 2 ways. 1, in both stanzas, he repeats the 4th line, different in each stanza. 2, he concludes both stanzas with the same 2 lines. Notice as well the rhymes within the poem. So the author kind of hit on some of the same things we noticed.
Yeah, it's calm, but it's repetitive.
Yeah, very good. So that was a perfect example of what your homework assignment is. Your homework assignment is to choose one of the poems in the book. You cannot choose the owl because we just did that.
I choose the owl.
But there are 6 other poems. You need to choose one of them, and you need to go through all of these questions and answer them in written form. So does that mean you should use punctuation, capitalization, complete
No.
sentences?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
This is an essay that you are writing me, essentially. This
I like
is
that
an-
you're finally like, I don't have to do creative writing. It's an essay now.
This is an essay. It's an analysis of a poem. You need to answer these questions. It needs to be at least 100 words.
Paul, are you writing all this down?
And I will point out number 6 is a very short poem. And some of you might think like, oh, I'm going to choose that super short poem. But just think about having to answer all of these questions for only 3 lines. You might be making more work for
Wait,
yourself.
what are the 3 lines?
You'll see when you get the book. All right.
You'll find
So that's your homework. 100 words, essay form, analysis of a poem, and then you're going to use the stuff you learn to help write a poem next week. So I would actually advise you to read through all of the poems, even if you're only analyzing one. Yes.
Do you want us to put the questions in, or do you just want...
No questions, because if you had the questions, it would not be an essay form, it would be a question and answer form. I want you to answer the questions in an essay. So an example would be
the poem is organized in a way.
Thank
that,
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
James.
CC way.
History way.
Story.
Oh yeah.
That's what I was
Felt like,
Alright, that is all.
alright.
You can
Right.
That's
pause
what we're
the video.
supposed to do for history.